Hey guys, Rod Morgan here. I'm down today in Oneonta, Alabama with Sifu Lamar Davis. Sifu, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule today to meet with me. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. So I'm down here today with Sifu Davis getting some JKD, some real JKD. This man, of course, he's known as the Trapping King, and he's studied with more first-generation Bruce Lee students than any man alive today. And it's been a great honor and pleasure to be down here today. Sifu, I wanted to ask you a few questions.
Okay.
So, how many years have you been training in JKD yourself?
I have actually trained in Jeet for, let's see, it would be about 40, close to 45 years now.
Wow, 45.
And previous to that, 10 years in different martial arts, just kind of 10 or 11 years training in different things. And from the age 20 on, I've done nothing but Jeet.
And that was my next question. I was going to ask you how old you were when you started. So you started at 20.
Right.
Well, just exactly how did you get started? What led you to the Jeet Kune Do of wanting to explore and stick with it for the rest of your life, basically?
Well, when I was young, I saw Bruce Lee play the part of Kato in The Green Hornet. And I didn't know exactly what Kato did, or didn't know that much about him at that point. Of course, not many people did know much about Bruce Lee at that point. But through an article in Black Belt magazine, I found out all about what Bruce Lee actually did as far as his martial art. And they had an article called Is Kato's Kung Fu Genuine? And it was a two-part article, and they interviewed Bruce Lee, and they went to his school, and they talked to him about everything, and I was just fascinated by what I read there. And then later on, Bruce Lee had an appearance in 4 episodes of a TV show called Longstreet.
Mm-hmm.
And I already watched that show because I liked it. Even as a kid, I liked that show. But the night that the episode premiered, that was titled The Way of the Intercepting Fist, which is the translation of Jeet Kune Do from Cantonese to English, I was literally sitting in front of the TV. And at the time, you know, we didn't have video cameras yet and things like that. So what I did, and a lot of people would find this humorous, but what I did is I had a little cassette recording deck, and I stuck that in front of the TV, and I recorded that episode.
Wow.
And of course, about halfway through, I had to stop and turn the tape over and all that. But anyway, I recorded that episode because, as it turns out, in that episode, Bruce Lee, his character was named Lee Chung, but basically he played himself. And he actually explained what Jeet Kune Do was, and actually taught the main character in the show Jeet Kune Do.
Okay.
And so therefore that episode, The Way of the Intercepting Fist, was his first appearance on the show, and he appeared in with smaller role in 3 subsequent episodes after that. But anyway, James Franciscus played the main character. But seeing Bruce Lee teach him, ironically, he was a blind insurance investigator. And so here you have a blind man learning a martial art that he could effectively apply even though he was blind. So that was my first actual exposure to Jeet Kune Do, because of course when Bruce Lee played the part of Kato, he relied more on more traditional Kung Fu movements just for the theatrical effects offered. And but anyway, I knew that whatever that man did, that's what I wanted to learn, and I pretty much devoted the rest of my life to learning as much as I possibly could about Bruce Lee and his art.
Oh, you've definitely accomplished that. Who was your first Jeet Kune Do teacher that you sought out and actually got instruction with?
Okay, now this is interesting, but when I was a teenager, when I was 14 years old, I found out that there was a gentleman teaching Kung Fu at the University of Alabama in Birmingham through their special studies program. His name was Thomas Seals, and he was the chief of police there on campus. And I started training in Kung Fu with him, but he had lived previously in California, and he had met some of the Bruce Lee students and actually learned some Jeet Kune Do from them. So he he showed me some of the Wing Chun elements.
Yes,
and
sir.
he's the first person that ever taught me sticking hands, or chi sao as we call it. And so that kind of got my journey started. But the real first training I had with a Bruce Lee student was when, I believe if I'm remembering correctly, the year would have been around 1978, I think. A man by the name of Joseph Cowles, Sifu Joseph Cowles, who had trained with Bruce Lee in Seattle, came to the University of Alabama in Birmingham to teach a 2-day seminar. And so I was thrilled. I was so excited because I was actually going to get to train with a Bruce Lee student. And so Sifu Cowles came to do the seminar. And the first day he taught basic Jun Fan Gung Fu, which is, as some people know, Bruce Lee's Chinese name was Li Jun Fan. So Jun Fan Gung Fu means Bruce Lee's Kung Fu, essentially. So he taught me the basics, and there was a lot of people at the seminar, but he kind of took a special interest in me because he saw that I already had a lot of the stuff that he was teaching, and I was already fairly good at it. And so everything that he showed me, I picked it up really quick. Now the second day that he was here, this was a weekend event on a Saturday and Sunday. On that Sunday, he was supposed to teach a women's self-defense course. And I was kind of disappointed because I'm thinking, okay, that's for women, so I can't train, and I really wish I could train. But anyway, he ended up, I invited him to come to my house for dinner that night if he would like to, and he said yes, I would like that. So he came to dinner, and then after dinner, we trained probably until close to 1 o'clock in the morning. Wow. Just, you know, with him showing me one thing after another, things that he actually learned from Bruce Lee. And so at the end of the night, I said, well, I'll take you back to your hotel now. So when we got back to the hotel, he said, listen, he said, I want you to come tomorrow. And he said, I'm going to put my assistant in charge of teaching the women, and nice. You and I will go into a different room, and I'll train you privately the whole time. Man. So I said, well, with your permission, I had at the time just a basic black and white camcorder, which at that time you had to stick the whole cassette, the whole video cassette in the thing, so it was huge.
Yes, sir.
But you know, that's what I had, and I said, would you allow me to film what we do? And he said, oh, absolutely, no problem. So that next day was like a dream come true for me, because all day, when the other group took a break for lunch, we didn't even break for lunch. We stayed there and just worked through the whole afternoon. And that evening, of course, I took him and his assistant to the airport for them to go back home. But that was my first exposure. And Joseph Cowles told me on the Sunday evening, he said, listen, he said, you are so good that you actually, you already qualify to be an instructor under me, because you pick this stuff up like nobody I've ever seen. And he said, so next time I come back, we'll discuss that further. And so I arranged to have him come back and do a seminar just for me and my students. And of course he did that, and he stayed some extra days, and we worked privately. And at the end of that period of time, he said that he was going to award me instructor rank in his art, which he called Wu Wei Gung Fu. Okay, now Wu Wei Gung Fu was basically the Jun Fan Gung Fu that he had learned from Bruce Lee, and a mixture of something that he called Aiki Jiu-Jitsu. Okay. And of course, he showed me some of the holds from the Aiki Jiu-Jitsu and stuff like that. And he said, of course, he said, I know, and he said, it doesn't hurt my feelings. He said, I know that you're really only interested in what Bruce Lee taught, so your ranking from me is based on your knowledge that I've shared with you and that you had already acquired of Bruce Lee's art. So that was really an amazing training experience for me, and I continued my association with him for many years, and of course he's passed on, but that was my first actual Bruce Lee student that I trained with. And in 1980, I brought Sifu Dan Asano to Birmingham for a seminar, and I was the first person to ever bring him into this area. So that was a very well-attended seminar, and Sifu Dan, also Richard Basillo came with him. So I had Sifu Dan and Richard Bastillo, and they came to dinner at my house, and we trained, and I showed him some of the equipment that I had built to design for my training, and one of those things was a spring arm. And he said, he said, Bruce had something similar to this that he trained with a lot, and he said, this is really good. He said, do you have any plans to patent this? And I said, no, I really don't have any plans to patent it. And he said, oh, okay. He said, well, I was just wondering. And a few months later, well, I would say maybe six months later, in Inside Kung Fu, an ad appeared for Hawkins Chung's magic arm. And it was something very similar to my spring arm. And at that time, Hawkins Chung and Dan Inosanto were partners in a school, a separate school from Dan Inosanto's school. And, they were partners in the school. So I assumed that he went back and told Sifu Chung about my spring arm and told him that I wasn't planning to patent it. So they released the magic arm. But anyway, I found that to be kind of fascinating and kind of funny at the same time. But, no ill will intended there. If they want to do something with it, I had no problem with that.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, because I got the idea from Bruce Lee in the first place. So,
right.
It's like when we were talking earlier today, and I said, there's really nothing new under the sun. Somebody's done something somewhere before you,
Yes,
so
sir.
That's just the way it is.
Well, it's amazing to hear that your very first lesson of Jeet Kune Do, when you went to drink from a cup, somebody turned the fire hydrant on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what is the curriculum that you base your studies on? What is it based upon? Okay,
I call what I do hardcore Jeet Kune Do. Now, the reason that I chose that word and the reason that I say hardcore, that word alone symbolizes the seriousness of something real, something serious.
Yes, sir.
Okay? Usually when you hear somebody say, oh, they're hardcore, you're talking about somebody that's really serious about what they're doing. They're really intent on perfecting their craft, and they continuously work on it throughout their life. Okay? Well, that's been my process with Jeet Kune Do. Starting off, of course, with learning some Wing Chun and learning the Jun Fang Kung Fu, and then continuing my path, training with different students of Bruce Lee. I ended up training with over two dozen students of Bruce Lee, and it's like in that process, I learned the Seattle curriculum, the Oakland curriculum, and the Los Angeles Chinatown curriculum. So what I have done is I have put the three curriculums together along with a generous helping of the material that Bruce Lee took from Wing Chun when he learned under Ip Man and Wong Shun Leung in Hong Kong. And that is my hardcore Jeet Kune Do program. So the entire spectrum of Bruce Lee's art is represented by my program. And like I said, I use the term hardcore because we really only focus on the things that Bruce Lee developed and the things that he taught. And, there are some people that say, well, Jeet Kune Do isn't meant to be a package deal like that. Well, later on in your development of the art, in your learning of the art, you can go to a point where you kind of make it your own and you kind of do your own thing. But to me, at that point, it's no longer Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do. You're kind of doing your own thing. Okay? So what I tell people is I say, if you come to me, you're going to learn the material that Bruce Lee taught. You're not going to learn my version of the material. You're going to learn the material that Bruce Lee taught. And that's why we use the term hardcore. And I stress that because that's very important to me, that people realize that what I'm teaching them is Bruce Lee's material and not just something I made up or something that somebody else threw in there.
So make no mistake, there is a core curriculum to Jeet Kune Do. It ain't just a bunch of stuff thrown together.
Exactly. You've got a lot of people out there who, for lack of a better way of explaining it, and I hate to actually say this, but you've got a lot of people out there that really have no clue what they're doing, yet they claim to be Jeet Kune Do instructors.
Okay.
Now, where this becomes a problem to me is the fact that they're using the term Jeet Kune Do, but they're teaching basically whatever they want to teach and calling it Jeet Kune Do. I have a saying, and it's a little bit deeper than just what you hear me say when I say this, but I tell my students, I say Jeet Kune Do is Jeet Kune Do, anything else is not. Okay? And I firmly believe that, because I believe that in Bruce Lee's process of developing what he developed, none of this was an accident. This was all carefully thought out, carefully formulated to be a devastatingly effective system of self-defense. There's no sport or competition aspect to it. It's raw self-defense, and at one point it was even referred to as scientific street fighting.
Yes, sir.
So, everything that we do is geared toward what I like to call real-world self-defense. So in other words, you don't play games, you don't get out there and waste motion. It's got to be simple, it's got to be direct, and it's got to be effective, and it's got to be instant, what I call instant. In other words, when someone attacks you, their attack dictates your response, and your response takes them out as quickly as possible. It's none of this block, 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 and then strike. You strike on the first beat, and you continue to strike until the conflict is over.
Yes, sir.
In other words, you're not playing games, you're not padding up and getting on a mat with your little spandex panties on and rolling around all over the place. You're ending the fight fast, just like it has to end if it's in the street. Because if it doesn't end that way, you go home in a body bag.
Yes, sir. Well, and that answered my last question, because I was going to ask you what Jeet Kune Do is, and that was the answer right there. And listen, Sifu Davis, I cannot thank you enough for your generosity that you've shown me to bring me into your school, and the time you've given me, and the other things that you've shared with me outside the camera. It means a lot to me. So listen, if you're looking for real Jeet Kune Do, come to the South, because it's here in Oneonta, Alabama. Look up Hardcore Jeet Kune Do and Sifu Lamar Davis. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney.